your personal life does kind of coincide with your business life. And I think that that's something that, I share particularly with people who are thinking about having a family, but, are really valuing the role that they play in business. And, there's no good time.
That's Theo Goldin, founder of Hint. And this is Make Yourself at Home, the podcast that takes you into the homes of people you admire to show you a side you don't usually get to see. I'm Kristen Twyford, and every week we'll talk to someone at the top of their career to explore holistic success and how work and home are inextricably intertwined. Along the way, we hope to inspire you to live well, whatever that means to you. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines, the household management app designed to help you manage your home and everything that comes with it, so you can live with ease. Today, we're talking with Theo Goldin, who's the founder of Hint, the author of Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, and the host of The Theo Goldin Show. Theo's entrepreneurship journey started with her own personal health journey. She found that switching from diet soda to water helped her lose weight and get her energy back after having 3 kids in 3 years. Today, the recipe she created in her kitchen has evolved into Hint Water, the zero-calorie, zero-sugar, fruit-flavored water sold in 30,000 stores across the United States. In this conversation, we talk about creating and growing Hint at home and how her family and her life at home have fueled her overall success. Make Yourself at Home with Theo Goldin. Theo, thank you so much for having us into your home. How are you?
Good, thank you. Excited to be here.
Us too. Thank you so much for doing this. So set the stage for us a little bit and tell us about your home and why you love it.
Well, I think the main thing that I like about my home is that it's comfortable. And it's interesting. I moved from San Francisco out to Marin County and a while ago, and I think almost 15 years ago now. But I did it initially for schools because I had little kids, and they had great public schools outside of an urban city. But I never really realized how the trees surrounding my home and just the comfortableness of being around, I guess, less formal. In the city, I felt like I had to have a much more formal situation in the house. And nobody I know has formal around their house. It's just very, very comfortable. And you're always looking for comfort and things that, can make you, I think better, feel better, and enjoy, especially when you're not working or, you want to take a break. And so I think that for me has been kind of the big thing. But I think also just the sort of indoor-outdoor effect of being able to really have space around me. I think you and I had talked before about this, that every day I start my morning hiking with my dogs and most of the time my husband. And it's just harder to do that when you're in a city. And so for me, my home probably is not just about the walls around me, but also the space that I'm able to occupy throughout my day that is really makes me comfortable.
Yeah. And people know you as the founder of Hint Water, you're the host of The Theo Goldin Show, and the author of Undaunted. They know you through, this entrepreneurship story and your, ability to lift up other entrepreneurs. What do you think would surprise people about who you are at home?
I think for me, I'm a very social person, but I'm actually, I definitely value my alone time a lot. I'm actually very comfortable with spending time by myself. And I read a lot. So I also listen to podcasts. And so I'm constantly looking for that space every day where I can have that alone time. And it's funny because I think it's really, really simple for me to be able to have sort of socializing and be around people. But I
Mhm.
think people are a little bit surprised that I am very, very happy when I don't have anything to do. I haven't made any plans and I, can just sort of be by myself and do whatever I want.
When you think back to when you were first starting out in your career and you were living in New York, you're bouncing around to different apartments, you're working at Time as an EA, you haven't had your family yet. Is this the life that you pictured? What did you hope for in your life when you think back to your early 20s and you're working towards something? What was it that you were working towards? Did you picture 4 kids and living in California?
No, not at all. In fact, I really thought, I mean, I grew up in Arizona and I really, for me, I wanted a city. I wanted to go, I mean, Phoenix and Scottsdale is definitely a city, but it was a lot less of a city when I was growing up. And I wanted to go somewhere that had taxis and I don't know, like it was like this strange obsession that I had, probably because you just didn't really see that as much for for me when I was growing up around that. But I think I always was really interested in journalism
Hmm.
and media, and I used to think that if you wanted to be in journalism, you first of all, you had to be in New York because that's where all the journalism was. And I still believe that it was mostly there. I think that the world has opened up significantly and even more so with the pandemic over the last couple of years, where you can work from almost anywhere. But I think I believed that working in journalism meant working for a brand, right? Whether that was Time or whether it was a television station. Um, that for me was like that's the decision you need to make. And I always wanted to work for something that I really cared about and that I thought I could add value to, but I enjoyed. I was never willing to go in work at something that wasn't that interesting to me. I remember when I was at uh, I can't remember if I was at CNN at the time or I was at Time, but I had a Wall Street company reach out to me who was really interested in recruiting me for a trading job. And I had been in sales at CNN, and so maybe they thought that, having that experience. And when I went for the interview, I didn't last as long because I just wasn't interested. I understood it. I had a minor in finance and I
Hmm.
could have been a trader, but I just wasn't interested. I couldn't imagine doing that every single day. And there are people who are traders who love it. But for me, I thought there's so many options. You just have to find that needle in a haystack and determine what you want to do every day. But so I was always clear about that. And I think that that's not necessarily something that every, 22, 23-year-old is clear about. Money, I wanted to be paid well, but I wasn't driven by just money. But I never thought that I was moving to San Francisco or that I'd become an entrepreneur or that I would have a significant career in tech or that I would start a beverage company. None of that. And so it just goes to show you. I mean, I think that hopefully everyone's journey is long, and you just have to really be open to kind of taking the journey with what is meant to be, because you just never know.
And when you think back to the lifestyle that you pictured for yourself, did you always picture a big family? I know you're one of five, right? You have a lot of siblings. Did you picture having a big family yourself?
I never really thought about it. It's funny. Like I didn't sit there and think, oh, one day I'm going to have a really big family. I guess I always thought I was going to have kids eventually. But I just wanted to leave Arizona and go to a big city. And then I was going to figure it out from there.
Yeah.
So
You're going
um,
to roll with the punches. It
I
makes
was going to
sense.
roll with the punches. And then when I met my husband actually in New York, I think for him, he grew up in New York. And so he had been around New York enough. But the
Hmm.
other thing that really drove us to come to San Francisco was the industry. The tech industry was happening way faster in the Bay Area than it was happening in New York. And the big industry this is in the mid 90s for in New York was advertising and and finance
Hmm.
and media as well. But I mean, those were the big things that were going on in New York. And so he was graduating from law school and he really wanted to do this thing called technology law. And all of the firms that he interviewed with in New York, they said, look, you could definitely eventually work on that here, but you should go out to San Francisco because there's way more work that's going to be coming to you there than will be coming to our office here. And so we thought that we were going to be in the Bay Area for a year, and then everything would speed up and we would go back to New York. But many, many years later, we're still here. And that's because we just loved the energy and the enthusiasm, the entrepreneurial spirit that we saw and really felt inside of the Bay Area. And
Yeah.
so, we consider it home now.
Yep. Well, on this show, we love to explore that relationship between your home and your home life and success in general. So, your overall success. And what I think is really cool about your story is that your business story is really your personal story. And one thing that you talk a lot about in your book, Undaunted, is that a lot of times in your career, big personal moments would happen at the same time as big professional moments.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite example of that in your own life?
Big personal moments. Well, one of the stories I talk about in the book is I was pregnant with my fourth child, and I wanted to get the product Hint on the shelf at Whole Foods prior to delivering my son Justin. And I was having a planned C-section, so I knew the date that I was going to be hopefully delivering Justin. And of course, I thought I knew the date that I was going to be receiving the product that had been made at our co-packer. Something I always share with entrepreneurs is there will always be delays, especially with your first batch of product. It never will show up. Everything takes longer. And that was definitely the case. We were really pushing this co-packer to get us our product, but it did not actually show up until the day before I was going in for the planned C-section. So I didn't have to be at the hospital until 2:00 in the afternoon. So when I woke up that morning, I said to my husband, he actually said to me, "What do you want to do this morning?" And I said, I want to go to Whole Foods and try and get our product on the shelf. And he said, okay, not what I thought you were going to say. I was thinking brunch or maybe a walk or do something, spend time at the playground with the kids. Nope, I want to go to Whole Foods and see if we can get the product on the shelf. And he said, we can do that when we come home in a few days. And I said, no, because we have a 2-car garage and there are pallets in one of the spaces. And so, there's street parking. We're going to get lots of tickets while we're at the hospital. You can't have a nanny that's watching the kids. I had it all figured out in my head. And he's like, oh, okay, all right, fine. We'll go to Whole Foods. And when we got there, I saw the person that I had kind of been, having a banter with about, oh, I'm going to go and develop this product. But I didn't want to say any more to him until I was absolutely sure that the product was actually going to be made. And so when I came to Whole Foods that morning. My husband was so nice. He had 10 cases on a rolling dolly that he brought into the store behind me. And I found the gentleman and I said, "Hi, do you remember me?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, you're very pregnant." And I said, I am. I'm very pregnant." And he said, like, "Are you going to have a baby in the store right now?" And I said, "Gosh, I hope not. I have to be at the hospital at 2 for a planned C-section." And he said, "Wait, what's a planned C-section?" And so that's when I decided that I would share with him what a planned C-section is. And I had had an emergency C-section before, so I wanted to share what the difference was. And my husband, of course, left the 10 cases and went and walked around the store because he was so horrified by the fact that I'm sitting here talking about childbirth to, the nice guy that was about to put my product on the shelf. And, when I came back, or when my husband came back and I finished my story, that's when I said to the gentleman, "So it would be really, really great if you could actually put the product on the shelf." And he said, "I'll try." We had no idea whether or not it would actually happen. I had to leave to go to the hospital. And so the next day after my son, Justin, was born, everything was great. He was healthy. The phone rang and it was the guy from Whole Foods. And he said, "You have to come back because the product is gone." And the first thing that came in my head was not, "Oh gosh, we've sold all 10 cases." I said, "Who took the product?" I mean, I had no idea that 10 cases were gone. I mean, it's funny. I definitely wanted the product to be a success, but I had no idea that all 10 cases would be gone like overnight. I mean, it was crazy. And so, of course, my husband left the hospital. He went and restocked, and so it was all great. But that was a moment when I thought, "Oh my gosh, like we've got to get out of the hospital because I've got to get busy. We've got to figure out how to make more product, everything." But
Meanwhile,
it's
you've got 4 kids under the age of what, 5,
6.
6? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And it was crazy. We came home and of course to my little kids, I'm like, "We sold the first 10 cases." And they're like, "Yay." And
Aw.
I know it was really, really sweet. So, but yeah, I mean, thinking back on those times too, I mean, it's like, seems like, so long ago, but more than anything, I think it's just that they're stories of, where your personal life does kind of coincide with your business life. They were all really important to me. And I think that that's something that, I share particularly with people who are thinking about having a family, but, are really valuing, the role that they play in business. And, there's no good time, right? You just
Yeah.
have to figure it out. And sometimes you can go a little bit slower. Sometimes you can figure out flexible schedules. I mean, I think that's the one thing that has really created a little bit more room, I think, for people now. There's options to work virtually versus working in offices. It's doable. It's not always easy,
Yeah.
but I think there's just more than anything, you just have to figure out what's right for you.
Yeah. Can you think of a time where you felt like your family was really being tested? You had this business that you were really growing and it had to be hard to balance. And I know there was sort of pros and cons you talked about in your book. You had more time, at home because you were building the business from home. Can you think of a time where you felt like you were being tested and how you guys got through that?
I think as a parent, you always wonder, am I spending enough time, with my kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would generally always drop them off, especially when they were younger. They didn't want me there when when they were in high school, right? But although, my son, who's a senior, just told me that he's like, you have to go to back to school night tomorrow night. You have to. It's the last one. So,
Oh,
I know, it was really sweet. So I'm definitely going to back to school night tomorrow night. But anyway, I felt like there were definitely a lot of women, and maybe some men too, who didn't work, and they were able to do, homeroom parent or have the cupcakes there, and those were things that I wondered if I would regret it later. But what I started to really make time for was the after school time. And so I worked really hard. I would generally get up before my kids even got up. And that was actually the time too when, I would figure out how to go out and get my exercise in. And I was, able to have help. So I was able to get some things done in the morning before they were taking off for school. But then I could actually spend time with them and getting them to school. But I felt like, again, you question that when you're going through it. I think in hindsight now, and this is one of the stories I talk about in the book too, is seeing your parents grow a business from nothing to, Hint is now a few hundred million, right? And, people are walking around the world with your product that you created in your kitchen. And that's where it started. I think, my kids I have one in graduate school, I have two in college, and one who's a senior in high school. They're able to see how much work went into it, right? And how somebody who didn't have beverage experience or consumer products experience, how, two people who are married to each other actually can work together. How you can switch industries from starting out in media to going into tech and then going into food, and, continue to learn along the way, create new roles, new categories, all of those things. So I think that what they got out of me as they're starting to, and my husband, as they're starting to think about what they do, is, find what you really enjoy doing. And it's okay to keep learning along the way. And, titles are one thing, compensation is one thing, but are you really jazzed up about what you're going to be doing every day? And, I think they're even intrigued by my podcast. I mean, they run into people who are listening to the podcast and listening to some of the people that I have on the podcast. And they're, to be able to hear that that's your mom, like that's your mom that's doing it. And she just, loves that, loves getting out of people their stories and their backstories. I think that they see what I see in why I'm doing it every single day.
And it sounds like you really built this business in your home. You had pallets in your garage. I read in the book that your kids sold the first bottles of Hint in your driveway. Is that right? At a lemonade stand kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many stories like that along the way. I mean, I ran into somebody the other day in San Francisco who I hadn't seen in a while. And she said, I remember the first, when you guys were first starting and your kids had a Halloween stand where they were just handing out the water, and they were telling people that, when you're having all your candy along the way, you definitely need water as well. And I remember this too. I mean, there were some, I think their first sales pitch was don't have any candy at all. You should just have Hint. And that wasn't working. And so,
Not going to win a lot of people over that way on Halloween.
they would, I mean, we had somebody else who said they would always have different stands along the way. Like once they were trying to raise money for the animals at the zoo. And so, I think they charged like $5 for the water. And people were like, wow, $5. Oh, well, it goes, to the monkeys and it did. I mean, they donated all of the proceeds. Like they would have all of these ideas, and they'd be explaining it. And of course, people thought they were so cute that they were actually trying to raise money for these animals so that they could, build something new or whatever it was. So anyway, we've always made it really part of the business. But again, I think it goes back to being creative and trying to figure out like what matters to you and sharing your passions, sharing your interests with people. That we've really just been, I mean, that's really the core of the company. And then I think also just being an entrepreneur. I think for them, for my kids, today, as they start to think about what they're going to do next, I mean, they might go start a company right after they get out of college, but they might also go and work for a big company and then start something later if they don't have a great idea like that. They know that there's not just one path. I even see it as they're going to school. I mean, one of the things that I've said to them is go take classes that aren't in your major. Even if it takes like an extra semester to graduate, like maybe you'll go into one of these classes that you never thought that you would actually have an interest in it. I mean, got a minor in finance and I had no interest in finance before I took this course, but I learned a lot. And obviously for a business plan and all of those things and running a business, it's actually a really good thing. But that doesn't mean that I was going to go and work on Wall Street. It's like learn not just to try and figure out if that's the career for you, but why it might not be the career for you as well. And just, and it's just a semester, right, to get through. So I think learning those stories along the way, I think are also things that my kids hopefully share with their friends as well.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? I mean, what's the worst that can happen, as I always say.
And then when you think back to the very beginning, I mean, they were there from the initial, experimentation. You were making the early versions of Hint in your fridge, just for yourself. When you think about that decision of going from this is a passion project that you're kind of exploring to we're going to build this business, and having that conversation with your husband, Theo, and it sounds like you found out you were pregnant with your fourth child right around the time that you decided we're going to turn this into a real business. Walk me through that conversation with Theo and that decision for your family.
Well, I had made some money at my previous job at AOL, and I was taking a couple of years off. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next because I knew that I wanted to do something. I wasn't going to stay home permanently with the kids and not work. But I was also, I mean, it's interesting because when I took some time off, people were asking me like, how long are you going to take off? Not my husband as much. I mean, he loved the idea that I was around and I was, really enjoying being a mom and going to mommy and me classes and really enjoying that. But it ended up being a couple of years that I was off. And so when I finally came up with this idea for Hint, I think my husband was just really excited that I had found, something that I was really passionate about. I don't even think we said the word passion as much as, it was just like, I smiled. I was super interested in it. And I was really curious about why there weren't products that didn't have sweeteners in them and why there was, so much water with, so-called fruit in it that wasn't fruit at all. And then they would put sweeteners in it and call it water. Like it just seemed ironic to me that this idea that I had hadn't been done. And so, I mean, he was curious about it as well. And then, of course, I dropped the bomb that I was pregnant with our fourth. And he was like, wait, what? I mean, this is crazy. You don't know anything about this industry and you're going to do it. But I think what he's realized is when I set my mind to something and I just keep talking about it, I'm going to do it. I mean, whether it's starting a business or, you know, buying a shirt that I've been thinking about, like whatever, going on a trip somewhere. He gets afraid when I start like talking about, have you ever heard of the Maldives? Or, he was like, no,
Here we go again.
Yeah, here we go again, or like skydiving and no, don't do it. So he knows like if I say it once, it's probably, there's a 50-50 shot but if I say it more than that and I keep talking about it, he was like, okay, we're going, I'm sure. Like I know it's in our future. And he, but again, when you see somebody who you love, who's really passionate about something, it just, it makes you excited because they're happy about it. Right. And I think that's the key thing. Look, I think that the hardest thing for people is to really find what they enjoy doing. I mean, it almost sounds like it's cliche now, right? Where, you say, go find what you love. But there are a lot of people who can't figure that out. And I think, unfortunately, the education system focuses on what is your major and sort of puts us into kind of this hole versus actually trying to discover, well, what do these companies do? And, you get so bogged down in trying to figure out like what your major is called or what your career is going to be versus actually getting out there and experiencing and knowing what you like about something and what you don't like about something. And I think that's another thing that I've really tried to instill in my kids too, is that no job is ever a waste of time. No experience is ever a waste of time. If the worst case is that you figure out that it's something that you didn't like. And right. And that
definitely.
I've had people say to me, oh, I tried to start a company and I really didn't like it at all. And, one of my things that I constantly am challenging people on when they say that is like, how big was the company? I mean, it was really early stage. Maybe you want to go in to work for a company that is a little bit bigger, that is, that, has funding or, what were sort of the core issues, I think is the key thing. But again, I think that experiences just help us get to a place where we learn more about what we really enjoy doing and what we can add value to as well. And I wish more people would kind of think about it that way versus thinking about, okay, am I getting a promotion? Am I going to be vice president? Am I going to be like, all of that really is a lot less important than are you adding value in whatever you're doing every single day, because that is what will ultimately make you the happiest, when you feel needed and when you feel like you want to get up every single day and go do something that people appreciate, whether it's a service or whether it's a physical product, whatever that is.
I want to talk about your husband, Theo, and your relationship. You built this company together. He was really your first employee. Why do you think your relationship is so strong? When you look back at your marriage, look back at your business partnership, what do you think is the key that helped you two sort of motivate each other? What works well about your relationship?
I think the key thing is that we're just really different people, and we both appreciate each other's, things that are each other's strengths. And we both, I think, find humor in the hard, right? And we know that you just have to keep moving. And more than anything, I think having somebody who understands you and that you can talk to about anything, I think is just it's hard to find that. I think and I think it's luck, I think it's not something that you that everybody can find. And I have many friends who, ask about it. And I think it's more than anything, I lucked out. But I also really I've always really appreciated surrounding myself with people that don't think the same as me.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not to say that we don't think the same sometimes, but we actually think there are many things that we don't agree about. And, and I think like too often people surround themselves with people who think exactly the same way that they are. I mean, look, that's really nice and really enjoyable, but it's kind of boring. Right. And
Absolutely.
and if you don't find people who think differently than you, then you'll never grow and you'll never change. I remember when that show Car Talk was on NPR, and I would almost go crazy. He could sit there and listen to Car Talk forever, and he would just laugh. And there were two guys. He'll listen to this and he'll start cracking up. But whatever, like that's the way that the world works. I love the fact that he knows what he's interested in and then he's really passionate about it. And, now he can use AirPods and he can go and listen to repeats, right? But because that's not
What a
something that
gift.
I'm not interested in. And I think that so often people think, find that person, and I think it's not just a, mate, but also a business partner. I mean, this happens a lot in business where people find, their business school friend, maybe they had a different experience before they went to business school, but they both, want to be entrepreneurs and they're very similar in the skill sets. And that just doesn't work out because you end up almost competing with each other, in terms of trying to figure out who does certain things better. Anyway.
I have one more question before we get into a quick lightning
Yeah.
round at the end here. So, in your book, you talk about how being undaunted is not necessarily being fearless, it's understanding what your fears are and overcoming them. Can you think of a time when your home life, your family, your relationships, your routines really helped you through a moment of fear in your life?
I think especially as my kids have gotten older, I mean, anytime when I'll have challenging or, tough days along the road when things are not going the way, I think my family is more than likely to say, "Oh, you'll work it out. You always do." And they always remember. And I'm like, "Oh, that did seem like a really hard experience." And so they're my support system now. Right. And I think that by watching me be able to get through things too, I think I'm their support system too, where they're able to see that, you're going to have bumps along the way, challenges along the way, but you just have to look back at the times when you really thought, I'm not going to get through this, but you do. And I think that is what my house looks like today or sounds like today.
Awesome. Well, I want to end with a quick lightning round of some quick hit questions that are just kind of fun. So the first one is, I know you delivered cases of Hint in your Jeep back in the day when you first started Hint, and it feels almost like a character in your story. So I need to know, do you still have that car? If you got rid of it, was it a sad moment saying goodbye to that Jeep?
It's a longer than a lightning round, but yeah, we had to get rid of that car. Unfortunately, we had a few people who were driving that car around and delivering cases. And the shocks were terrible. One of them bottomed out the car. I mean, it was just that poor car. It was very, very sad.
Early in your career, you were living in New York City and bouncing around to different apartments. What's your craziest New York City apartment story?
Well, I was living first on the Upper West Side, and I had a 150 square foot apartment, just 150 square feet off of Central Park. And that was my first. It was basically a room. And it had really high ceilings. And so I built a loft. I didn't build it. I actually had somebody come in and very bare bones, but I built this loft. And I just met my husband. We were just dating at that time. And he walked in and he just couldn't believe it. Like I had it all figured out and it was all organized. But I mean, it was a funny, not so funny, but basically I had made it so nice that my landlord decided that he wanted to jack up my rent because I wasn't paying that much money for the apartment. I mean, it was a lot more than what somebody was paying in Arizona, but for New York, like I had really put a lot of, sweat into painting and making it much more livable. And it didn't look like it was 150 square feet. And so anyway, I came home one night and there was a nail in my lock. And I was like, what is going on? There's like a nail in my lock. And then I called my landlord, and he, of course, wasn't answering the phone. And then I ended up calling a girlfriend and stayed over the night. And then the next day, I called a locksmith, and he said, "Oh, I know this landlord." He said he's trying to get you out of the apartment. And I'm like 22 years old in New York City. I said, "Wait, what?" And he said, "Has he been trying to jack up your rates of your apartment?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Yeah, he's trying to get you out." And so this happened. This is like the third, apartment that I've been to. And so I was like, that's terrible. So I call him up and I said, "Did you put a nail in my lock?" He said, "Oh, why would I put a nail in your lock?" I said, "Well, I talked to this locksmith and he told me that this is, what you do." I mean, I think back on it now and I'm like, I had no idea exactly what was going on. Well, then after I'd gotten the lock fixed that night, another nail went into my lock. It was pouring rain out and there was super glue, crazy glue inside the lock. And so when the locksmith came back, he said, "This is going to be really expensive because we have to replace the whole thing and because you've got super glue in it." So I called the police and I'm like, "Listen, I heard that this guy is, known for this." And that's when the police told me, "You should just move." Like at this point, because this is just going to go on, forever.
It's never ending.
Never ending. And so I did. But yeah, that was my crazy New York story. And I moved down to the West Village and was much happier. So
There you go.
yeah.
What's one healthy choice that you and your family make in your home that you would recommend to other people?
Healthy choice. Well, obviously hint water. But I think for me, we constantly have fruit around where I'm just grabbing stuff. I mean, it's funny. I always think about, especially in the food industry, how people are creating things that are, you know, less calories, better for you. And I often think that, maybe you shouldn't have those things at all. I mean,
Mhm.
that they're just not, if they're not very good for you, if you're sitting here trying to do half as much or, it's not as unhealthy or whatever it is, it's just, it just seems ironic. And I think that just understanding what you're putting into your body is, fuel. And
Mhm.
and ultimately, if you're not putting good things into your body, it may not catch up with you immediately, but it eventually will. That's not to say that you shouldn't, you know, if you get lucky enough to go to the French Laundry, that you're going to have a really nice, piece of cake or whatever you're going to have, but in moderation, versus thinking about, um, you know, how can I have that piece of cake every single day just because it's less calories? It's just, some things really aren't food that you should be consuming. And I think that you find good things around our house and good products around our house too. And read labels, I think, is another thing that, if products don't have labels, they're generally better for
Mhm.
you. Not always, but I think, also just read labels, even if the print is very tiny. Figure out how to read a label because I think
Yeah.
it's often important.
What's one thing in your home that makes your life easier?
My dogs. They make me happy. I have 3 Labradors, and I have 2 puppies that are 11 months old. And then I have one who's sleeping right next to me who's 13 and a half. And so they definitely make me happy.
Yep. What inspires you to live better?
My family, consumers, my friends, my home. It's just doing what I love doing, I think is probably the best way to answer that.
Well, Kara, thank you so much. This conversation has been amazing, and I really appreciate you coming on Make Yourself at Home.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you to Kara Goldin for joining us on the show today. Check out her book, Undaunted, to hear more of her story, and tune into her podcast, The Kara Goldin Show. I'm Kristen Twyford, and if you enjoyed our conversation today, I hope you'll leave us a review and subscribe so you can join me next time and make yourself at home with more great guests like Kara. Still to go in Season 1, we have Adrienne Grenier, Danielle Canty, Kate Torgerson, and more. We'll see you next time on Make Yourself at Home. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines, household management software that helps you manage your properties and everything that comes with them, so you can make the most of your time at home. Learn more at ninesliving.com.